Jack the Ripper. It was a cold, foggy evening in London, October 1888. The streets of Whitechapel were dark and quiet, except for the occasional sound of footsteps echoing through the narrow alleys. The gas lamps flickered, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. People hurried home, pulling their coats tightly around them, afraid of what might be lurking in the darkness. For weeks the neighborhood had been gripped by fear. A mysterious killer, known only as Jack the Ripper, was on the loose. No one knew who he was or where he would strike next, but everyone knew his name. Mary Ann Nichols was a poor woman who lived in Whitechapel. She worked as a prostitute to survive, but life was hard. That night, she was walking home, her footsteps slow and unsteady. She had been drinking, trying to forget her troubles. The fog was so thick that she could barely see a few feet ahead. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, but no one was there. Her heart raced, but she told herself it was just her imagination. She continued walking, but the footsteps came again, closer this time. She quickened her pace, her breath visible in the cold air. The footsteps matched hers. She turned a corner, hoping to lose whoever was following her. But as she did, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Before she could scream, a hand covered her mouth, and she felt a sharp pain in her neck. The last thing she saw was a pair of cold, dark eyes staring into hers. The next morning, a passerby found Mary Ann's body in a dark alley. Her throat had been cut, and her body was mutilated. The police were called, but they had no clues. The killer had left no trace. The people of Whitechapel were terrified. Who could do such a thing? And why? A few days later, the police received a letter. It was written in red ink and addressed to the boss. The letter claimed responsibility for Mary Ann's murder and promised more killings. It was signed Jack the Ripper. The police didn't know if the letter was real or a cruel joke, but they couldn't ignore it. The newspapers got hold of the story, and soon all of London was talking about Jack the Ripper. People locked their doors at night and avoided the streets of Whitechapel, but the killer wasn't finished. Annie Chapman was another woman living in Whitechapel. She was kind and well-liked, but like many others, she struggled to make ends meet. One night, she was seen talking to a man in a dark coat and hat. He had a strange, almost gentlemanly air about him. No one thought much of it at the time. The next morning, Annie's body was found in the backyard of a house. Her injuries were even more gruesome than Mary Ann's. The killer had taken organs from her body. The police were horrified. They increased patrols in Whitechapel, but the killer seemed to always be one step ahead. On the night of September 30th, 1888, the killer struck twice. Elizabeth Stride was the first victim. She was found in a courtyard, her throat cut. But before the killer could finish, he was interrupted by the sound of a cart approaching. He fled into the night. Just an hour later, Catherine Eddowes was found dead in Mitre Square. Her body had been mutilated, and part of her ear was missing. The killer had left a message written in chalk on a wall nearby. "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The police quickly erased it, fearing it would cause panic. The double murder shocked London. The newspapers were filled with headlines about Jack the Ripper. People demanded that the police catch the killer, but he remained elusive. Mary Jane Kelly was a young woman who lived in a small room in Whitechapel. She was known for her beauty and her cheerful personality. But on the night of November 9th, 1888, her life came to a tragic end. Mary Jane had been seen earlier that evening with a man. He was described as being of medium height, with a mustache and a deerstalker hat. They were heard laughing and talking as they walked to her room. No one thought anything of it at the time. The next morning, her landlord went to collect rent and found the door locked. When he forced it open, he was met with a scene of horror. Mary Jane's body was mutilated beyond recognition. The room was covered in blood, and her heart was missing. It was the most brutal murder yet. The police were baffled. They had no suspects and no leads. Jack the Ripper had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Over the next few months, the police received hundreds of letters claiming to be from Jack the Ripper. Some were clearly hoaxes, but others were more convincing. One letter, known as the From Hell letter, was particularly chilling. It was accompanied by a small box containing a human kidney. The writer claimed to have eaten the other half. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to catch the killer. Theories abounded. Some believed Jack the Ripper was a doctor, due to the precision of the mutilations. Others thought he might be a butcher or a sailor. Some even suggested he was a member of the royal family, though there was no evidence to support this. As time passed, the murders stopped. Jack the Ripper was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery to this day. The Whitechapel murders left a lasting impact on London. The name Jack the Ripper became synonymous with fear and evil. Books, movies, and TV shows have been made about the killer, each offering their own theory about who he was. But for the people of Whitechapel, the memory of those dark days never faded. The shadow of Jack the Ripper still looms over the neighborhood, a reminder of a time when no one was safe. In the years since the murders, many people have claimed to know the true identity of Jack the Ripper. Some say he was a Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski. Others believe he was a lawyer named Montague John Druitt. But without concrete evidence, the truth may never be known. One thing is certain: Jack the Ripper's crimes changed London forever. The fear he instilled in the hearts of the people of Whitechapel is a testament to the power of a name. And though he may be long gone, the legend of Jack the Ripper lives on.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. See you soon.